What's going on, everyone? It's Thursday, it's office hours, it's your chance to ask me any questions that you have. The door over here in my office is it's open for you, even though it's closed. That means that it's open. This is my office here in Midtown Sacramento. I'm going to give you a little panoramic shot, some artwork on the wall from amazing local artist Kyle Lawson. Yeah, this is the spot. This is where therapy goes down. And I have about 15 solid minutes. So your questions right now will be answered during this 15 solid minutes. How are you guys doing? Some of you are still doing the Rewriting My Story program, and I'm curious how you guys are doing. If you're unfamiliar with the program, that's an online program through drmondo.org, my website, where I help you rewrite your story. So some of you are caught telling stories about yourself that you don't even know that you've been telling for a long time, and it's stories we need to help you let go of. Some of you are telling stories where you are not the main author. Someone else authored your story, and some of the elements of your story, like I'm not worthy, or I'm not enough, or I need to do this to be enough, or I don't deserve a healthy relationship. Some of those things you've been holding on to for way too long. The program is designed to help you rewrite your story, to take back the pen, to take back authorship rights. It's also geared around people who have been using food as a way of comforting themselves, as a way of coping with negative emotions, stressful emotions, scary emotions, and helping them also renegotiate their relationship with food. So it's those two things. It's an ability to rewrite your story, that's the name of the program, and it's also the ability to renegotiate your relationship with food. We have people right now all throughout the world, we are happy to say. There's people even in Australia who are doing this program. And the feedback so far has been the program gives them an opportunity, if they do the work, if you show up and put the time into the lessons, and you do these 8 stages, that you will find the tools needed to rewrite your story, renegotiate your relationship with food. One of the things that I've been getting questions on this week is, this thing about emotional eating and stuffing your emotions, numbing your emotions. There's some lessons that we do in the program in stage number 1 and stage number 3, where we teach you about the function of the behavior. I always tell people there's a function to why you do what you do. Often the things that we don't like, the things we feel shameful about doing, there's even a function to that behavior too. So for some of us, we look at being overweight, or we look at struggling with food or using food as this really nasty, shameful thing. You know, how many of you have ever gone through a drive-through after a stressful day, gone through the drive-through after a scary day, an anxious day, a worried day, a frustrating day, ate, parked next to the drive-through, right to the side, and then threw away all the trash before you could get home and walk inside the door almost like it never happened? Don't act like I'm the only one, okay? You've done it. I've done it before too. And that pattern we often don't want to even acknowledge, let alone try to figure out and understand, because there's so much shame attached to it. But there's a reason why you do that. There's a reason why you do what you do. And I think the key, what I find, is that if you want to shift behavior patterns, you have to start looking at them, exposing them vulnerably out in the open, and looking at them through the lens of compassion, not the lens of shame. That is so much about what this program is all about. And if you guys are experiencing that now, share some of your stories about what insights you've had when you've looked at your emotional eating cycle from a position of compassion and not a position of shame. When you do that, it really starts to unlock the ability to change things. But again, if shame had a game plan, if shame had a locker room blueprint, the blueprint obviously would be, let's get this person feeling so ashamed of what they're doing to be in isolation about it. I mean, think about that. How many of the things that you really are frustrated with that you do, how many of those things do you feel like you could freely discuss right now? How many of those things do you feel like you could freely type down below? You want to type, you started to type, but you deleted back out of it because you felt shame about it. How many of those things would you bring up to family and friends? How many of those things would you want to be posted on your Instagram and your Facebook feeds? The reality is that in order for us to change, we have to expose. And in order for us to expose, we have to feel a certain level of compassion for ourselves. And again, when we expose the behavior patterns with the lens of compassion, we look at it with acceptance and compassion. I don't have to love the fact that I did that drive-through thing, but I have to accept the fact that I tend to do that drive-through thing. And you're willing to do that with someone else. You know, whether you're willing to do that in therapy or whether you're doing that in a setting where you have support in a spiritual group, in a friend circle, but where there's the ability to be honest, to keep it 100, to be vulnerable and share with one another and explore out loud what you do, and you'll probably figure out why you do it. And you'll probably figure out there's a function to that behavior. And that's the key. You can't change something until you acknowledge it. You can't change something until you understand it. You can't understand it unless you got compassion for yourself and you realize there's more to the story than meets the eye. That's what the Rewriting My Story program is all about. That's what this Facebook and this YouTube and this Instagram and all the stuff that we're doing with Rewriting Your Story, that's what it's really all about. It's basically saying, let's give you the invitation to have compassion for yourself right now. You don't have to love where you're at right now, but have compassion for where you're at right now. It'll help you understand it. Understanding it's the key to changing it. So again, like people have asked sometimes, what did you figure out in your journey then? That's a common question that will get asked. What did you figure out in your journey? How did you stop going through the drive-through? How did you stop the emotional eating patterns? And for me, it was just rinsing and repeating and consistently, getting in front of observing that pattern of behavior and unpacking it and taking back the layers. So if you've heard me share this before, I apologize because it's probably a broken record, but I believe that we all have about 1 to 2 trigger emotions that if put together and if stirred in a drink, like that's our cocktail of emotional eating. And for me, I had to realize that for a long time, and it's amazing because when I talk about it, I don't feel like I'm in bondage to these feelings anymore. The feelings of fear of abandonment, the feelings of loneliness. Those two feelings, the fear of being abandoned and the fear of then, I guess, being alone, those were the two scariest feelings. They produce anxiety. That was like the mint on top of the mojito as far as the emotional cocktail went. But when I felt those feelings on a given day, if there was something in my world triggering a fear of abandonment, a fear that I might end up being alone, man, from a young age, I conditioned my brain to use food for comfort. I conditioned my brain to immediately start thinking of an escape or a numbing agent in food. Now, I realize today that, food was designed, high saturated fat foods, high calorie, low nutrient dense foods, high sugary foods. They're all designed, high processed foods, they're all designed to give my brain a rush. And that rush gives me an escape and pleasure. And it takes me away from those uncomfortable feelings of abandonment and loneliness, or at least the perceived fear of such. But if I sat there and I continued to run from what is the backstory that caused me to have that relationship with those feelings of abandonment and loneliness, if I never even acknowledged it, I couldn't figure out the backstory. And I'm telling you right now, if I couldn't figure out the backstory, I wouldn't have developed insight to change it. Can the change be made by the food alone? Yes, you can definitely find that you are less likely to make food-related emotional regulation choices when you're eating clean food. I found that with my way of eating now in the whole foods plant-based, that just simply not having those foods in my system means I don't go to them when I feel anxious, when I feel overwhelmed, when I feel like I'm afraid of being abandoned or lonely. That's part of it, but it's bigger than that, truly. You have to know what are those feelings, what are those emotions, and you got to do work around it. Part of the reason I could sit here and say that I'm not as afraid of being alone, or I'm not really as afraid of being abandoned, is because those are things those are quests that I had to find peace with in my own personal journey. The reason I set the program up is because I want you guys to have a platform to continue your own personal quest, not just to identifying that cycle, not just to identifying the trigger emotions, but actually to taking the next step and finding healing. To taking the next step and saying, what is the backstory? To taking the next step and saying, what can I do to heal that backstory? And in doing that, you can get to this point, where you do feel, where there's not mastery over those emotions, but there's a whole new way of responding to those emotions when they pop up. And over time, the more that you acknowledge those feelings, the more you sit in those feelings rather than eat them away, the more that you start to feel like there's a transition that begins to happen. That's rewriting your story. That's renegotiating your relationship with food. Again, I just wanted to hit you guys with that one. The office hours are going to be short today. And most of the questions I've been getting have been sent to me through the private inbox. There is some stuff that I'm seeing here. I'm going to acknowledge before I hit the road and run. Again, I want to remind you, every Thursday we do office hours. We're going to do it again next Thursday. I'll be traveling next Thursday, but I'll make sure we do it. I'll be out in Atlanta, but we'll do office hours next Thursday. It's every Thursday. Every Tuesday night we have our Facebook Live show where we interview someone who's rewriting their story. We have Justin Lacey, an amazing guest this Tuesday coming up. So Tuesday is the show where we interview someone about the work they've done to rewrite their story. And then on Thursday, I take your questions here at office hours. So don't forget and tune in. Ashley says, I've done that at my house, eat everything, so I throw out in the outside garbage bin before John gets home. Hey, I'll tell you what, Ashley, believe me, you are not the only one. That is classic emotional eating behavior. And the shame piece is the one that allows us to feel like we have to throw it out outside, because there's that, gosh, if my partner acknowledges it, they're going to ask something, I'm going to feel embarrassed, I'm going to feel ashamed. Man, I've been there so many times. I had to tell my family and John, or I wouldn't have helped changing my behavior. I need accountability. Yeah, I think accountability, yes. But I think, again, I love accountability, but I love compassion more than I love accountability. I think compassion leads to accountability. I think that when you have compassion enough for yourself to say, it's okay for me to just be vulnerable and accepting that I do this sort of shameful thing. And when you give yourself permission to have compassion, you're more likely to be vulnerable. You're more likely to say it out loud. When you say it out loud, then all of a sudden you disarm it. It's hard to have shame about things that we say out loud. So I love that. I was actually going to say that's the first step. If some of you are struggling with that right now, the first step to change would be simply to throwing away the food and letting it sit on top of the trash heap. So you might have to see it again, or someone in your family might see it. It's not to reshame you. It's just almost as a level of acceptance. Yes, that did happen. Yes, I do engage in that behavior. That often is an easier change, albeit it's still difficult, but it's an easier change to make now than this idea of magically snapping your fingers and no longer being an emotional eater. Now, I believe you could take even greater leaps towards that. Again, if you're interested, do the program, drmondo.org, click on programs, get signed up, get right into lesson one. Lesson one deals with all this stuff. Today, I'm just giving you a little bit of a preview of that. I hope you guys have a great week. Again, what is this space used for? The number one thing is that I want to be a space where we talk about the emotional side of your weight loss journey, where we talk about not weight loss, but health transformations. I happen to be really passionate about whole foods, plant-based eating. That's my thing. It might not be your thing, it's my thing. And if you know me at all, you know that what I'm passionate about, chances are I might end up telling you about. So yeah, we talk about whole foods, plant-based eating here. It's not the only way to achieve health. There are other roads, although I would argue I think the whole foods, plant-based way is the optimal way. But the point is that this is just a place where I want you to feel like you can come and you can get a different perspective on health transformations and health journeys, where we talk about the emotional side of eating, where we talk about the emotional side of your story. And we provide a platform for you to rewrite your story, get emotional support, and just allow you to be the best version of you possible. That's what this community is for. That's what these office hours are for. I'll see you guys again next week for more office hours. Tune in on Tuesday, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we will get after our interview with Justin Lacey. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope you guys have a great weekend.